Bill Schmid's with me here on the Denton Day Show. You've heard him on SportsMap Radio and 97.3 The Game, at Bill Schmid Radio, where you can find him on Twitter. Bill, what's going on, man? It's been a long time since we talked, man. How are you?
No kid, man. I was just going to say that. Good hearing from you again. I'm doing good. I'd be doing a little bit better if that last 3 minutes would have went a little bit differently in Milwaukee last night. You see, I got this championship gear from the reigning title holders, but it didn't look like the title holders last night.
Yeah, what did you see last night? Because I watched game one, and my thought after game one was that was Chicago's like one shot. They played really well. The Bucks kind of struggled in the middle of the game. And then from here on out, the Bucks are just going to run with it. What did you see in game two?
I saw a lot of the same things. And listen, it's easy for us to always say there's no reason why any team should be sluggish, right? There's no reason you take a break. There's no gas pedal that you ease up on. But over the last couple of weeks, teams in the Eastern Conference had to do that, and they were trying to jockey for some position. Now, I think Philly ended up with probably the best matchup for them in Toronto, even though they lose Thibault for a couple of days. Milwaukee and Chicago felt like the best matchup. Milwaukee had lost like one game to them in the last 4 or 5 years. And then everybody was trying to stay away from Brooklyn. And now you look at it with Ben Simmons coming back, depending on if they even advance, how good Boston's played, there did seem to be a little bit of a coasting into the playoffs. And there's been a little bit of a coast for this Bucks team all year long after the title defense, but they've been sluggish each of the first two nights. Last night, I think they turned the ball over each of the first 4 possessions and gave up a quick 9-0 run in the first minute and a half. And you're burning a timeout right in the first 90 seconds of a playoff game at home. You're off to a weird start, and they really never got out of that funk. Started to, and then Middleton goes down with the knee injury, and we're all kind of waiting to see him get out of the magnet here now. But it's been a sluggish team that, if we're being honest, and we're all big boys here, no one's going to get too offended. I think they were overlooking the Bulls, and the Bulls took that personally, man. They haven't been to the playoffs in a few years, and they get some checks too. And DeMar DeRozan did what I thought, and I wanted to get your thought on it too, where there's a lot of people that are very worried this morning. And I said, fellas, I think this is still a 5, maybe max 6 game series, because going into it, if DeMar DeRozan was going to score 40, 45, 50 on you, you might lose a game. You might lose a game or two. That's what happened last night, and you coincidingly lost one of your second best players. Middleton's out for the rest of the series. I still think they get past, but there'll be a little bit more drama and a little bit more television revenue, I think, for TNT for sure.
Yeah, as someone that bet the Bucks in 5, I'm with you there. I thought it was fair to think that Chicago would be able to get them once. I just thought they gave their best effort in game one. But I'm curious, in the event that Middleton, does miss, maybe not the entire series, but a portion of the series, who are some of the guys that you look at on the roster that need to step up in his place?
Let's start it up with Drew Holiday. And he has been he's a fascinating study, dude, when you watch into postseason performers, right? Because Middleton has been in the city for about 8 years before he wins the title. And people had gone so hot and cold. There's this little meme that goes around, and it's like the Chris Middleton cycle. It's like, starts to play well, you buy he's a max player, signs the max contract, shits the bed in the postseason, right? And then it kind of just goes around the circle, and you kind of wait for it to revolve again. And that never happened last year. He had a couple of down games, but he carried them for a couple of weeks. Drew Holiday had a 4 for 20 night in game 7 against Brooklyn. I mean, 4 for 20. And he went out and shot 20 shots the next night too. So his confidence won't be rattled. They're going to need Drew Holiday big time to take over some of the scoring role. But man, they're going to lean on those big Adonis-like shoulders of the Greek freak and say, Giannis, just carry us as far as you can. I personally, dude, I'll be honest with you, Denton, I'd be surprised if Middleton plays the rest of the series. Now, I don't know that. I'm not reporting anything. I have zero inside information. But when you go down with a sprained MCL and a non-contact injury the way he did,
right,
I would doubt you see him within a week, right? Like that feels like at least a 2-week thing. Already scheduled. Game 5 will be 6 days from now. That's putting him out most likely for the rest of the series. But it's a team that won the Eastern Conference Finals last year after sitting tied at 2 with Giannis sitting on the deck. They got some metal, but it's definitely a different one for sure. Grayson Allen will be a big name. You'll see a little bit. And the other one is Jordan Nwora. He will be a little bit of a factor since he's going to have to. He plays and fills it up second year out of Louisville, but defensively he's struggled to fit in. He'll get some minutes, and they're going to need him to be able to put up some points in the absence of Chris.
Do you think that this year for Giannis in the regular season, because he's in the MVP conversation again, and it feels like he's dominated that conversation for the better part of the last 4 or 5 years now, do you think this year in particular has been better than either of the 2 MVP seasons that he's already had?
That's a good question. The second MVP season was pretty remarkable just because he sets all these marks in PER, right? Your per 36 minute numbers or whatever. And I'm not smart enough to listen. I studied to annoy people for a living, right? Then all the numbers and everybody, people are geniuses with some analytic numbers. He set records in all of these, per possession numbers. And then he did it again. And he kind of just, after the first MVP season, and they get ousted by Toronto, where it felt like they were really climbing and ascending and just going to skip a couple notches on the ladder and get to that finals. He came back after that disappointment and just dominated from where he left off. Started picking up a couple of different parts of his game. Seemed like he was messing around with his 3-point shot a little bit. And then he got hurt right before the shutdown in the COVID season. He had a little bit of a knee injury there and missed the last 3 games they played. And then into the bubble just never seemed right. They were completely misjointed. There was some stuff going on back home that really took some attention away from a civil rights perspective that was going on here in Milwaukee while they were down there. It was a really tough spot to be in. They ran into a buzzsaw in Miami. But this year, his game is so much more evolved. He hasn't necessarily taken over every single night like he did for those first 2 MVP seasons, Denton. But you just see the maturation of him from like 15 to 18 feet out. The way that he's adapted to knowing when to be able to make the right pass. There's a spot last night in the game, Greg Anthony called it out on TNT, where Pat Connaughton's standing in the corner. He knows he's got a shooter in Grayson Allen over into the back wing. And he gets up onto the high post and doesn't feel like he needs to commit an offensive foul to get to the hoop. He doesn't have to bury through 2 guys to get himself to the rim. He knows where the game is. He knows where his assets are. And he's just become such an elite passer that his game is getting better. So it's much better than it was in those years. But just from watching and seeing it every night, that second MVP season was something special. I didn't think I'd see a better version of Giannis until they maybe won a championship. And then it was like, holy cow, it's 4 months later and this guy's scoring 34 a night. Okay, we got some problems on our hands if we're the rest of the league.
So you got that championship banner behind you.
Right?
What was it like after they won? Because I remember here in DC after the Caps won and then after the Nationals won, and we'd had a long championship drought here and we were partying in the streets. What was it like last year when the Bucks win it in Milwaukee?
It was remarkable from this vantage point, right? So I was a ball kid in high school for the Bucks for 4 years. And the way I described the organization at that time, it was under previous ownership, who was a state senator, Senator Cole, just a marvelous man. But it was like a small business being run in the NBA. It was, everything was very quaint, very intimate. Everybody knew everybody in the office. And you were kind of just, we got to the 6th seed. Holy cow, we're cooking with gas, right? Like, okay, we're pushing something to a different level. And you resign yourself, I think, in this sport, maybe more than others, right? In baseball, Milwaukee's in again, small market, smaller television revenue that you're getting, but you're going to be so dependent and reliant on one superstar player changing the course of history that I kind of just punted on the idea, right? That was going to happen.
Right.
And you strike gold with this kid out of the crowd legitimately in the draft when they pick Giannis, that it was just he commits to the city earlier in the year, right? Like maybe a day before their first game, He signs the Supermax contract. They acquired Drew Holiday in the middle of it. You kind of pounded your head into a wall with Eric Bledsoe for a little while. You're like, okay, this guy's not going to take us to the next level. You got to get somebody that can do it on both ends in the pressure spots. So the city was just waiting for it. And I say this for game 6 because a lot of guys that I work with are very, very worried, right? They're always very worried. Something bad's going to happen. We can't get excited about these things, Denton. And I looked around and I'm like, there are 100,000 people outside.
Right.
On a Tuesday in July in a downtown area that before they built the stadium, right, was, I mean, it was 4 to 5 empty full lots.
Right.
To where this was in the heart of downtown, right? Like this was the northern part of the downtown district that had started to die out. And it was a coronation. I mean, they had to set up 2 different areas to watch the game because people were flowing down there. Mm-hmm. So right after it happens and right after the game's over, the people funnel out from outside. People are lighting fireworks into the streets and different things like that. The funniest part of that night, as I'm standing outside of the stadium, we're watching the game on the Jumbotron and they're firing off the fireworks that they had obviously bought in preparation for this. The only problem was, Denton, they shot it over the trophy ceremony. So we're all watching it on these screens, trying to listen to what we had been able to do for the last 2.5 hours standing out here. And we missed it because we were watching some fireworks, but it was okay because we partied long into the night that night. So it was 50 plus years since they had won back in 71. And the championship drought, this gives you a little bit of level to it. When I was growing up, Bucks were awful. They went to 1 Eastern Conference Finals in 2001. Packers are great, right? No doubt about it. But then the Milwaukee Brewers, 1982, go to the World Series. Just go. Lose in 7 games, blow a 3-1 lead. Then they threw a parade for that team when they returned to the city. And when I was in middle school, they put out on Friday nights at the games a mini bobblehead series of the team that freaking lost in the World Series. So that's how starved people were for a championship. So we're going to wear these NBA championship sweatshirts and fly the banners for quite some time for sure.
Now, I'm glad you brought up the fact that you were a ball boy, because I wanted to ask about that. How did you end up with that? Was that like something you sought after? Did someone just pitch the idea to your parents? You're like, oh, this could be cool. How did you land that gig as a ball boy?
Just a wild spot. I was in high school, right? They would generally put stuff around the announcements. And there had been a family friend of mine whose older sister had done it maybe 5 to 6 years before I even got into high school. So I was aware of the position. I knew kind of what it was. And then they had put something out on the loudspeaker at school and said, applications were in the guidance office. So I ran into the guidance office, a little pear-shaped youth and freshman in high school. Now, the lucky part was, and this is all, I got a lot of breaks into it, right? Dumb luck. Let's be honest first. Secondly, though, as I went in, you had to be 15 and only in high school. Well, luckily your boy was not very good at reading as a kindergartner, had one of them late August birthdays, so he got held back a year.
Right.
15-year-old high school freshman. All right, we're cooking with gas. I can apply and have a chance at it. You write a 250-word essay and send in this like pamphlet almost, right? 8x10, 8x10 on like a cart, almost like a piece of like colored paper, right? The thicker kind of paper, right? Printed on through. So I send that on in, and 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail that said I had an interview for it. And I was pumped up just to be able to get an interview, because I was like, probably going to be able to see the locker room, right? Get into the bowels of the stadium. That'll be pretty sweet. And I'll remember this for forever. I walk in, and I was aware of this. My parents had put it in the back of my mind. There was like, there's somebody that lives in our neighborhood. I think his name's Clark. His name's Clark. He lives in our neighborhood and he works for the Bucks. And sure enough, I interview with my boss, future boss, Andy, shake his hand, and I reaches over, Clark Hillary, Rachel, Clark, nice to meet you. Billy Schmid. I think you live in my neighborhood. Hey, we could carpool to these games. This is great. And what ended up being just a joking throwaway line about like a year later after I had gotten the job, as I skip forward here, my one boss goes, well, I didn't even know how we could say no to you after you told the guy that you were going to freaking carpool with him. Like there was no way that we could get rid of you at that point. But we interviewed and I thought it went very well. And then I got a letter maybe about 2 weeks later that said that I had gotten the spot. So it was a remarkable opportunity. And like I said, looking back on it, it was a lot of dumb luck.
Right.
And then it was one of those gigs that throughout high school, as long as you didn't screw up too much, they kind of invited you back the next year. So I was lucky enough to do that for 4 years. And the last 2 years I spent pretty much as just like a locker room attendant for a pregame. So I was standing in there for 2.5, 3 hours before the game, after the game, cleaning up and doing laundry and stuff. So it was an incredible opportunity to see the business side of the game and also the human side of the players, which I think definitely it's molded the way that I see the sport. And I think games a little bit differently just because there is a dehumanization that happens in sports, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just human nature. When you're watching people on television, a lot of times you think, oh, they're just characters. Right. No, they're real people, and you learn a lot more about that, and you get to know some of the guys. And it was one of the positions and jobs that I know if I didn't have, I definitely wouldn't be where I am today, and being able to I think speak on games and speak on sports the way I do with the perspective I do, for sure.
Was that at the tail end of the Michael Redd era, or had he already been gone by the time you got there?
So Michael Redd was, let me think. My first year was, because the Michael Redd story is funny, and I might have to check Basketball Reference to make sure that I got this right. So he had like 2 big knee injuries right there, almost like simultaneously at the end of his career. Because it was at the end. I walk in first year of Brandon Jennings' career. So that was a big time for the boys at the moment. And Michael Redd played maybe 3 games in the 4 years that I worked there. When he returned, it was a big deal, right?
Yeah.
I think it was my 3rd year in, because I was in the locker room and I remember his shoes said M-Dot on them. That's a smooth tongue to have on the Nikes, right? Like that's a smooth look, Mike. I get it. I like what we're doing here. And then all of a sudden it was gone because I think he hurt himself again. But yeah, that was he was probably the dude where you look up and you're like, man, I watched this guy for 7 or 8 years, and oh, okay, this is normal dude. He just walked out of the bathroom and waved behind him because goodness gracious, that one's a burner. So that was the right end of the Michael Redd era. I was there for the swap of Andrew Bogut for Monte Ellis.
Ooh,
a remarkable individual. And then Steven Jackson, Drew Gooden, Samuel Dalembert was on that team. JJ Redick was there for like 15 minutes while I was there. There was a lot of guys that slid in and out of that 15-man locker room while I was there. But definitely there were some incredible characters. Steven Jackson is A1 though, and I'm so glad. I joke about it with people all the time. Like, I'm so glad that he has a microphone in front of him now, because if he had a microphone in front of him 15 years ago, Pat McAfee just signed for $40 million. Steven Jackson would be making $80 million, because that dude has stories to tell that people will sit down and listen to. They might not like him, Denton, but they'll sit down and listen to him for sure.
So when you got that job and you started working there, had you already had this thought in mind that sports media was the direction career-wise you wanted to go?
Yeah, no doubt about it. I don't know about when it was for you, but it was pretty early on that I definitely wanted to get into this. And it was much more of the play-by-play aspect of it. I think a lot of guys in our business, right, get into it being like, I want to call games. That sounds right. Listen, everybody does, and people don't give those jobs up very often. But I'll remember it for forever again. Same deal. I have a weird, very, I think, what's the way to put it? Sentimental memory, right? It's
Right.
selective too. We're in maybe 4th or 5th grade, and there was a play that we did about Jackie Robinson, and I was the narrator of the play in 5th grade. Big part there. And then I was also like, for the one baseball part of the play, they had me play like the announcer man.
Right.
And everyone's like, oh, that's so good. You are so good at that. And it does kind of get into your head. And then I got introduced to sports radio, maybe in like 7th or 8th grade, because it's weird to think now, and listen, we're not dinosaurs, we're 27, but it just still wasn't the flamethrower that it is now. Like FAN only started in New York maybe 30 years ago or something. And WSCR, the Score in Chicago, was like the first big time station that I found out about. And I would listen to Boers and Bernstein down there, which is a classic afternoon show. And then I found a show in my city, which was 1250, The Fan.
Yeah.
And I listened to them when I was in, like I said, 6th, 7th grade, 8th grade. I was such a little groupie at that point that when I was riding my bike to school, I had it in my ear plugs, and that was a full-on Walkman, right then. Like, that was a transistor radio that I had to get in there. I had to slide it on through the hood, and just messaging guys on Facebook. I knew I wanted to do it. I was trying to intern into high school time. And I remember this one morning show, guys, like, you got to ease up a little bit, kid. We can't let anybody intern here until you're in college. So it was something that I always had my mind fixated on. And then when I got into college age, and I was kind of scouting around of where I was going to go to school, and I knew I wanted to play football. I knew I wanted to continue to play. I also knew that I wanted to be able to get into broadcasting and try to fast track myself on that spot as quickly as I could. So I definitely scouted those prospects out. And then once I got hurt again in senior year, much larger institutions, right, with a little bit more financial backing of the situation that you'd be into, right? Those kind of went by the wayside, and I was able to, which again, perfect situation, dumb luck. I got to play at Carroll University, which was 20 minutes from my house, where I grew up, and about 15 minutes away from that same radio station that I told you I grew up listening to, and ended up working there right out of the gates. And that's how it happened. So it was always in my mind. And for a while, I tried to make sure that, for the majority of my decisions, I was trying to, with this goal in mind, to be able to set myself up for it.
A little less than a year ago, I should say at this point, you joined a really unique fraternity of sports media guys that were name dropped and photo dropped on random college athletes. What was that feeling like when you get that notification they have your picture up there?
Well, listen, it's still my pinned tweet. So I think you know how much I like it. One, I get to hang on to the glory days, right? A little more svelte back in that day, Denton. Your boy hit a couple more of the Krispy Kreme drive-throughs after he stopped with those 6 a.m. workouts. But yeah, that was hilarious. I remember lighting up, and I had like 15 or 20 of my buddies before I even saw the picture message to me, and like, holy crap, dude, you got made. It really was. It was like in The Sopranos, right? Or when you walk on out into one of these mom movies in The Godfather, I felt like I got made. I was walking around a little bit different. I was telling people off.
You're puffing the chest up a little bit
exactly.
more.
I was like, you saw that little Ricky Ricardo mustache that the kid was rocking. That thing was ugly, but he was on random college athletes. He had the flow going. It was fun.
So talk to me about the hair, because I know James Harden said a couple of years ago in an interview, it would take like $10 million for him to cut his beard. Ever since I've known you, and clearly in college, you've had the flow going. Is there a price for you to cut the flow, or is it just something that's staying until it's just not there anymore?
I'm a cheap date cunt, Denton. I'll cut this shit off anytime I can. I apologize for cursing on your podcast. I didn't mean to do that to you, but no, it's a funny story. I grew my hair out one other time when I was young. I was maybe like 6th grade or something, and it grew. It was in the Justin Bieber phase, right? That skater phase that we were all in. We were all rocking Vans. We were all wearing skinnier jeans than we probably should have, especially when you're shopping in the Husky department like I was. And it was just like the bull cut, right? It kind of just went up and then down, and it was a bad look. So my mom always had me in a buzz cut, And when I got to college, this is as bad as it sounds. Then all the good players that were getting dates, the guy that buddy of mine, Matt, I'll name drop him right here, Matt Schlander. I hung out with him a couple of different times, and he goes, he had a girlfriend. He had a house on campus. He was balling out. He had the long hair. Saw a couple other guys with the long hair. I'm like, I might try to grow this stuff out a little bit. And it also helped that I didn't have anybody paying for my haircuts anymore. Right. So I was like, I'm not trying to pay for a haircut. To the guys that seemingly are playing well have long hair. So I'm going to try to follow the trend. And then I don't think I cut it for maybe a year and a half. I remember the last time I got it cut, though, shaved down, and it was maybe like week 4 of my freshman year. We were playing our biggest rival in school at the time, and I was going to start that game, and I was like, okay, that's it. We're shaving it down, buzzed it down to a 1. Went out there, played absolutely terrible, gave up a sack. I think we got like 85 yards of total offense. And then I was like, well, didn't work. So we're just going to let it roll on out here, and we'll see what else we can do on the magic happening. But there were some awkward phases in there, Denton. I don't know what you've ever done with the lettuce, but I went from that buzz cut to trying to pull it back. There was a lot of days where I just immediately, there's like maybe a 1/4 inch, maybe a 1/2 inch of hair, and you're just like yanking it back, putting it onto the hat, throwing it back. And so I had a nasty little comb over there for a while. But yeah, we got to the point. Now I worked so hard to be able to get it to this length, and now it's a little bit tougher. I did always have the idea, and I still do, when I decide to get it off and to finally wrap up the long-winded question. I wanted to donate it. That was my first idea, is I want to get it long enough where I can cut it and donate it. And I liked it so much. And then I was like, okay, now I got to make sure that I can get it long enough where when I cut it, the boy's not buzzed again, but I can still donate. I have it long enough. So I'm in the judgment area, but there's definitely going to be a switch here at some point. We just don't know necessarily when.
Man, I was in college and I grew my hair out in college. It was like the first time I really, really grew it out. And I had the same thought. I wanted to donate it. So I grew that thing out for about 2 years. And I go to this barber shop and I'm like, hey, like, I want to donate it. Well, you don't go to like a real, like, nice barber shop to donate hair. They don't know what to do with that shit. So This guy's like, yeah, sure, we can do that. And, generally, like, you tie it up in the ponytail, you cut it, you put it in a bag, right? Well, this dude just starts going away at the side of my head. And I was like, I'm like 19 or 20 at the time. So I'm not bold and confident. And he cuts the hair, and it was a lot of hair. Like, it was coming down to my nipples, and he just stuffs it all in a bag. And I'm like, brother, like, this is supposed to be a ponytail. So I kid you not, like, the next day, it's 7:30 on a Saturday, and I'm in my college dorm room with this stupid ass bag of hair, trying to put it into a ponytail. Like, I'm scooping it up, and like, I got all these hair ties. I'm like, all right, let me tie this here. My roommate woke up and he looked at me and he's like, dude, what are you doing? And I'm like, I have to donate it. It was a mess. I did it. It was an absolute mess. So you talked about working with the players in the Bucks and learning like the human side of the athletes. You played ball in college. How have those two things impacted when we come across a scenario in sports that oftentimes sort of the talking heads miss the human element of the story?
Well, I always say it this way too. And it was very early when I was really getting on air. My first hosting job was with Leroy Butler, who's going to go into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Holy cow, watch your toes. That was a freaking name drop, Billy. And then one other cat that I'd worked with, Gary Ellerson, who was just a great mentor for me as well. He played for the Badgers and the Packers for a while. And they were the first ones to talk about me playing, Division III college ball on the air. And I was like, okay, dude, I played D3 ball. All right. You guys played in the NFL. All right. This guy covered Jerry Rice. You went up and played against Mike freaking Singletary. I'll calm down about playing against St. Norbert College. Right. Like there's levels to this stuff. And I'm right here. Right. I might be a little step above. I'm right here though. And they both said, and Gary said it to me a bunch of different times. He goes, what you don't understand is that players know that you understand some of what they go through. Not all. We understand there's never going to be a time where I can say I can relate myself to kid playing in the Big Ten as a freshman, right?
Right.
But I can say there's an understanding I think I have to, dude, you got to understand that that's an 18, 19-year-old kid walking into 100,000 person crowd playing in the big house, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to start under center in his third game in college football. Good luck. And that was the first one of it. It was one of the first really ones that I remember going into it. It was when Wisconsin was playing Graham Mertz. He was the 5-star quarterback, highest recruited quarterback, whatever the school had ever had. And people are saying, you got to start this kid right away. You got to throw him on into the fire. You got to throw him on in, let him learn on the job. You're going to ruin this poor kid.
Right.
Like he's going to walk out of playing Kansas high school football. No disrespect to the Jayhawk state, but holy cow, Dan, it's not like he was playing in Plano, Texas. I mean, you gotta ease some people into this. So the human aspect, I think that I can see is that, and I wish I was a little smarter on this. Some of my bets that I make, hey, you don't know what anybody has going on at home. And I think about this in the NBA a lot. You don't know what the conversation was before he left home, right? You don't understand the conversation that this woman in the WNBA finals had before she left. You don't know what's going on financially. You don't know if their mom's sick. And all of these players in this professional setting have to put that aside, walk in for, we see 2.5 hours in the game, 3 hours, 4 hours if it's a baseball game. We see all that on TV. But man, they're there for 9-10 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
They need to shut all of that out to make sure that they perform the best day in and day out. And that part of it to me was, I just marvel at it. And I was able to do a lot of baseball stuff. I did post games for the Milwaukee Brewers for a while, station I was working at covering the Brewers, and same deal. I said it a number of times. I just marvel at your ability to check everything going on outside of here and know that people are doing the same thing to come and watch your game, right? They're like, this is my escape. Well, this is my job, and I'm trying to escape everything else that's going on here, albeit with 100,000 people watching, yelling, you suck all the time. So like that part of it's different. And I think that's the part that I definitely do pride myself on. I can't say that I know what it's like to hit a 95-mile-an-hour fastball. I don't know what it's like to block Brian Urlacher or shoot a 3 in the NBA finals. But I do know that when you pull into the parking lot that day, that there's a human being that goes in, there's a human being that goes out. Right. And it's incredible to be able to watch how you're able to channel all those emotions in to play what a lot of people always say, a kid's game for a king's ransom.
Do you remember the feeling after the first time you hosted a show? Like you do the show, you get through it, and all those nerves at the beginning, you get through it. Do you remember that feeling the first time you hosted a show?
Oh, absolutely. I also remember a lot of bad shows that I hosted out of the gates, right? I know a lot of bad ones I did. And I also remember the first couple of shows that I did. The first time that I walked out of the studio after hosting a show, I just remember feeling drained. And like, it was weird because, okay, I had done the 4-hour shift. I had done longer shifts than that.
Right.
And I'd been in the show. I'd been there running the board while people are doing the show. But the first actual time, you're the red light, the first comes on. I just remember being drained. And I'm like, why am I so tired? And you realize that it's just because you're trying to hit this energy level for a consecutive 4 hours. And then it's sit down, calm down, and then fire it right back up. And that part of it, the up and down, was definitely a blend or something that I had to be able to learn, right? It's definitely an ease into the fact of it. But the first couple of times, and I do definitely remember the first time that I kind of hit a groove, right, where I got out of that zone.
Right.
And it was maybe, it took a good like 6 or 7 months. And I had been doing a show with with my partner, Tim Allen at the time, who's a sensational broadcaster. And, there was like 3 or 4 days where we didn't talk about what we had just talked about on the air.
Right.
And that's when I started to know, okay, this is starting to get good. This is starting to get normal. I'm not worried about and thinking about psychoanalyzing every single thing that I said, but I can still go back and listen and critique. But yeah, first time. I also know about this, and I don't know about you. We all kind of have our quirks that we have to hit like on each different type of show to get ready. There was a time there where I had a different regimen if I was doing a morning show, if I was doing a midday show, if I was doing an afternoon show. And then I tried to blend them all in together at once. And then I was just sweating. Then I was just nervous. And I would remember, and I'd have people joking with me, and I'd be taking off my sweatshirt like 4 minutes into what did we just start? I'm like, yeah, but I'm dripping sweat back here because I'm fired up, or I'm nervous as hell about what I'm saying. One of the two is happening at just about all times for the first few years.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because, you've worked just about every shift in your traditional sports radio day. What are some of the differences, either from a preparation standpoint or like the way that you cover certain things? Because you're going to talk about something differently in a midday than you will a morning and a late night and vice versa.
So I did, I'll start it up like in the sequential timeline of what I did it. I first job that I was like a real producer. Well, first time I was doing any updates or anything, first time I got to crack the microphone was a hunting and fishing show. I was doing sports updates on Saturday morning at like 6 a.m.
Yeah.
That fucking sucked, right? That was a time where I'm like, maybe I get into selling insurance, right? Like this is not something your boy's trying to sign up for necessarily right here. But as that preparation was, it was fly by the seat of my pants, get in there at 5 and crunch every number that I possibly could. But then when I actually like got into a job, I was producing afternoons and then I hosted that afternoon show. And that preparation is different because you can't talk about the game that happened last night like everybody else necessarily, right? Because everybody's heard what happened last night. Everybody's more focused on what's happening tonight. So that part of it was a unique spin. You got to put your own kind of spin on it, but you were in more of a digging mode, right? You're trying to dig into a different type of story, a different type of angle. And then I did a lot of post game, which is kind of like a morning show right after a game, right? You're go, react as quickly as possible, but everything's so fresh. And that was, I thought, really good for me personally in the business wise, was because there's only so much preparation you can do for a post-game show, right? Like you can have every stat that Clayton Kershaw's had against the Milwaukee Brewers, splits for the last 15 years, but the game's 2-1 in the 9th, and then there's a blown save, runner comes home on an error, and boom, you're talking about it right there.
Right.
So like there's only so much prep that you could do, where I think it kind of taught me not to over prep and just have all of this information and feel like I got to get all of it in and just unload all my information, all my bullets right out of the gates. So that helped. And then I went to more of a little bit of a midday spot once I got let go from the afternoon show back in 2020, and then started working at SportsMap. I was doing a lot more like midday shows. I remember I filled in for about a week or so, maybe a couple weeks on like the noon to 3 slot, and that was kind of similar to afternoons, but different because it was a different focus, and I was able to kind of step into more of like a sports gambling sphere of it.
Yeah.
And then doing mornings now, where I'm working on 97.3, where I'd also had done middays, kind of messed around there and had done some afternoon stuff too. The morning preparation is so different because, again, you're kind of reacting to the game last night, but if it's not a good game, people don't necessarily want to talk about it. They want to talk about something that's going to get you up and running. You're much more strict and I think locked into a clock, because people kind of depend on you to be their clock, right? They're like, oh, these guys are holy cow, they're in their second segment and I'm not even showered yet. That means that I'm probably going to be late. Like that kind of stuff actually is a thing, right? I kind of remembered back to when I was waking up with a show in that sense, right? So that part, you're a little bit more strict and stingent on where you're going. But the preparation is a lot the night before, and then a lot when you're just trying to slam 2 cups of coffee so you can read what's on your computer screen. But all of them are different in their own ways. I'll definitely say I like, and I think my heart's definitely in the afternoons of sports talk because of what I said. There's build up to what you're doing tonight. You're more looking forward than looking back.
Right.
But when you're looking back and what you're looking to discuss is going to be a little bit more big picture stuff. It's going to be, it's your own unique take, and it's much more opinion necessarily, I think, than just react what happened that kind of mornings and middays are. So there's, I've been like, and here I gloss over the longest tenure that I had, which was doing overnights, or not overnights, which was 9 to midnight. And the night show doing SportsMap all night was, again, it was a lot of opinion, but then it kind of mixed into the fact of where I was doing post game for maybe the last hour, but for a couple hours, I'm doing like in-game stuff, and I'm talking about how Monday Night Football is transpiring while talking about the games that happened yesterday. Right. So that was just a blend of awesome. I was able to throw anything and everything around. That people that are listening to you, generally, if they're listening at that time, they're probably going somewhere. Right. You have their ear, I think, maybe a little bit longer potentially than other slots. So that was really, really fun, where my preparation was all day, but make sure that you're open enough to something crazy happens in this, Utah LA Clippers game. We're going to have to go and see what's going on. So that part of it was really, really fun because you were able to be malleable and be able to change around what you wanted to do depending on what was happening. But you had your core information, what you wanted to get into. And that was a blank canvas, man. I was able to paint whatever and however much I wanted to.
Do you have a preference? And I don't want to get nobody in trouble or nothing, but like, do you have a preference in terms of solo versus a 2-man show, a 3-man show? I know there are a couple 4-man shows out there. Like, what to you is the sweet spot, either when you're listening or when you're hosting, or is it different between the two?
So I think that's a really good question. And I guess there may be a little bit different, but similar in the same vein, because I guess like when I'm doing a show and when I'm kind of like planning on how I want to do it, I always do try to put myself quickly into like a listener thought of like, all right, dude, am I going to be interested in this if I'm listening? Right. Like, sure, I might be entertaining myself, but I'm also kind of a weird cat, right? Like I might have weird interests that most people aren't all that excited about. So personally, I think the true 2-man dynamic where you're going back and forth, but it's not necessarily like, I think you think 2-man and it's Mike and Mad Dog, where it's, one guy's just losing his mind and another guy's just continuing throwing something back at him. There's a couple of really, really good blends of conversation, I think, with 2-man. I think of show, I mentioned the station a little bit earlier, SCR, The Score in Chicago. They got an afternoon show. Danny Parkins and Matt Spiegel host it. And they have 2 other guys. They have 2 producers. So it's a little bit different. It's 4 voices that but 2 dominant, 2 on the air, 2 that are going to run the conversation and have the conversation, but clearly have 2 other people that are there throwing things in. Right. So I've always liked that, where there's 2 main voices and then 1 to 2 that get brought in. The solo show is, again, it entertains me because I like hearing myself talk.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot of other people like hearing me talk. So that part of it is kind of funny, where I enjoy it from, I can go wherever you want and you can have your stance, go at your own pace, bring in your own clips, all that kind of stuff. You make the painting what you want.
Right.
But I don't know that, right? And listening to radio for a long time, the best people that do it are Dan Patrick and Scott Farrell. They got 5 people on the show, right? So like that part of it's a little different with how many people you have throwing it back over to you. I've done one of those 4-man shows. I was the point there for a 4-man. And that is hectic.
Yeah.
But it's fun in and of its own right. Like matching that energy for 4 hours that's fun. That's a lot of fun to be able to do. And then the 3-man, I don't have a ton of like full on, 3 true main voices on the program. But I think that dynamic can go where there's a referee, and generally there'll be a 2-on-1, right? Or, 1 versus 1, and somebody's kind of off on the side narrating the conversation. That's fun to be the main guy in, because you can throw out a topic, you can throw out a question and let people fight, or you can go and pick a fight. So I like that, having a couple of options of being able to go in and scrap with other people.
So, Bill, I'll get you out of here with this. You've been exceptionally generous with your time, and I appreciate that. I don't know if you're like a 5-year plan kind of guy, right? I feel like that's like a guidance counselor kind of question. But when you look at
girlfriend here now too, what's this 5-year plan going on with?
But when you look at your future, you've done the national stuff, you've done the local. Where do you see yourself in the coming years? Is there a point that you're looking to achieve by the time, let's just say, you hit 30?
It's a good question, and it's definitely something that it's actually one that I've been having a lot of with myself too, because you kind of bounce around a little bit. You see different aspects of the business and different ways that it's done. There's something that is a real gravitational pull for me on the national scene, right? Being able to talk about everything that's happening, the top stories, the top NFL plays, the top NBA headlines. That stuff's really fun and appealing to me. Because I love all sports. I love all the leagues, and I love being able to go and pick through what are the biggest topics and have just a take on them. But in terms of being able to dig in and where I'd like to see myself, like I did joke about it, but it's true. I think everybody's dream in this business is to be, maybe a play-by-play guy for, their favorite team when they grow up. My station here just got the Green Bay Packers, and to be able to be a part of building up, at 97.3, the new flagship for, my personal favorite team when I was growing up, loving football. That's really cool to be able to be a part of and somehow be in an avenue, while not necessarily giving up at, some point the dream of being able to call those 3 hours. I guess the long-winded answer, and how I've just had everything laid out here, and just, well, I like this part of this one. 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 I think the way that I've always answered it is, you can kind of feel when something's right. Right? You can feel when there's true good chemistry, when nothing's forced, when you really enjoy being in the studio with everybody that you're being in the studio with on a day in and day out basis. And you're talking about stuff that you're really, really passionate about. I'm really passionate about Wisconsin sports. And there's some folks in our business, right? A lot of times you get forced to move, you get forced to relocate and do something different. And sometimes you almost have to like manufacture some of that passion, the energy. Nothing ends up being manufactured from this standpoint. So I love where I'm at right now, and where the trajectory is going with our station. I'd love to, within the next 5 years, I'd love to have my name on a morning, an afternoon, a midday show, being the number one guy and talking to Packer and Bucks and Brewer fans all about. But listen, I'd also love to have my name on a midday, afternoon, night show again on a national scene. So wherever they end up, I've said this a couple of different times, and again, I like hearing myself talk. It's not a lie here, Denton. I've had this thought of world domination and just being able to be on the radio, some kind of radio 24/7. So I've done 9 hours a day. That is a freaking load. So I'm going to backtrack on that. I'm going to step back. I'd like to be able to be doing, I love the national scene, and I'd love to be able to do that while still having a voice locally, if that makes sense. And being able to be that passionate guy, but also still be able to talk about the sports scene around the country, because I watch all the games. I bet on all the games, right? So like that part of it for us is a lot of fun, because, hey, we got takes about what happened in that Charlotte Portland game last night, because I had the -5 on the Hornets, and somehow LaMelo wasn't able to cover this for us. So that part of it's fun, and I don't know that I'm ever going to lose that excitement for it.
Bill, can't tell you how much I appreciate it, man. This has been a great conversation. We'll have to do this again sometime this summer.
Dude, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on here, man. Always fun catching up. Good to see that you still have that hail to the R word flag.
Yeah, it's redacted.
Up behind you. I see you blocking it with the head, doing well with that. Always good catching up with you, man. Thanks for having me on here, dude. And I'll definitely hop on it whenever you'll have me again.